everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and let's dye some yarn. Right here I have 300 grams of Knit Picks Swish DK. This yarn is 100% superwash merino wool, and I pre-soaked it for a couple of hours in just some plain tap water with no acid. If you would like to learn more about this yarn base, I do have my Knit Picks affiliate links down in the video description. As I add water to our catering steam pan, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to my lab partner today, Sarah Brenneman. Sarah, thank you so much for being my lab partner today, and I really hope you're gonna love this yarn. I've added a total of 16 cups of water here in the pan, and you can see that our yarn has plenty of space to move. There's enough water in here that even though we have some yarn at the surface, it's not compressed. So as we add color on, there's a chance for the color to move through the strands a little bit better. I'm not turning on the heat to start heating this up, but the plan today is to dye the first side with one color, then flip the yarn and dye the second side with another color. And then, well, we'll see what we end up with. And looking at the wet yarn, if we love it, we'll let that be the end. If we don't, then we'll add more color. If you try something that's a little bit different and you don't like how it turns out, you don't have to stop at that point. But let's go look at the colors. Today we will use two different colors of Dharma acid dyes, Caribbean Blue and Electric Violet. Both of the dyes in these containers are 1% stock solutions, which means that I have 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid. I also have this jar of Electric Violet left over from a ChemKnits dye-along that is at an approximate 1.5% stock solution, which means there's closer to 1.5 grams of dye per 100 milliliters of liquid, which means that if we were to measure out the same volume of these two dyes, this one would have more pigment in it. The stock solution bottles I use have really small holes, so I do want to transfer the dye to smaller jars. But I thought it would be handy to actually measure the amount of dye that I'm going to use today, which is not something that I always do. This way it would be a recipe I could replicate, but really also it's so that way I don't use too much of the Caribbean Blue dye, which is fairly potent. So I think, and this is not the best measuring vessel, when you're going to measure out a volume, you want to use a container that is closest to the volume you're trying to measure as possible if you want it to be really reproducible. So using a 500 milliliter cup to measure out 100 milliliters, since I have a 100 milliliter graduated cylinder, I may as well use this. Now this is a 1% stock solution, 100 milliliters, that's equivalent of 1 gram of dye. And now we can see that these, I think these might be 4-ounce bottles that come in tulip tie-dye kits. 100 milliliters fills up most of that bottle, which honestly is something that is really, really good to know, and good to have that as a reference point. Now, the Caribbean Blue is the color we're going to use second because it can spread out a lot more. But goodness, okay, since I know now that 100 milliliters basically fills that container, and we have a little over 100 milliliters of this 1.5% stock solution. Let's just transfer this directly. And I know it was over 100 milliliters because they're, oh gosh, I totally made a mess. But we do have there are graduated marks on the mason jar, but I need to clean up because I made a mess. I was gonna say, it didn't look like there was very much dye going into the container. If I had a yarn mop on hand, then I would be using that right now to clean up. But, you know, accidents happen. So let's compare the volumes, and I'll continue cleaning up off camera, between these two bottles. There is a little bit less volume in the purple than we have in the blue, but the purple has 1.5 times as much dye. So we are close to 1.5 grams of the Electric Violet and 1 gram of the Caribbean Blue, plus whatever we rinse out of these containers as we add color onto our yarn. Ta-da! We're all clean, or at least as clean as this drop cloth ever gets. Our yarn is heating up really nicely, but the one thing we haven't done yet is to add any acid. And so I'm gonna add, I think, just 3 tablespoons of white vinegar, giving us a ratio of 1.5 tablespoons of white vinegar per 8 cups of water, which honestly is a bit low. And I'm just kind of gently, I don't want to like mess things up very much, but I'm trying to just gently stir this a little bit to move the acid around. And now we're going to bring over our purple dye to start dyeing with that color. All right, and my plan is to kind of scribble this color on. I'm not squeezing that hard, and I'm also not going to move the yarn very much. I am adding some to the ends, and we will be adding more dye. I just wanted to give it a moment and see what some of this might do as we then add a lot more color on. I've used a little over half of that dye that I've measured out. Now we do have 300 grams of yarn here, and so with the 2.5 grams of dye that I've measured out, the ratios there are totally fine. It wouldn't be too much dye that this yarn couldn't handle it. Let's go ahead and give this yarn 5 to 10 minutes, and then we will come back and add some more purple. Dyeing yarn this way is a lot of fun, but one of the things that I am really concerned about is that when you add the purple on, you might get purple on this facing side, but also some on either edge here, leaving a narrow area of yarn on the bottom that doesn't get any of that purple color. And so then when you think about it, if you flip it and the same kind of thing happens, there's gonna be some asymmetry to the colorway we create, which might be the case. It might be very asymmetric. Or if we have enough volume in there and the acid was low enough to let the colors spread out a little bit, then maybe we'll have more color penetration through to the center and other side. One nice thing about doing this technique on DK weight yarn is that there's fewer strands overall. There's only 240 something, 260 something yards. Let me go check. 246 yards. I think I was on the right track before. But comparing using 240 yards of yarn to having like 460 in a fingering weight skein, there are fewer wraps, fewer skeins, so the odds of getting color on more of those strands at once are a little bit greater. This isn't something that comes into play a ton, but I do find when I'm doing something like speckling, it's easier to get good coverage on yarn that is thicker because there's just fewer strands to worry about, and so there's less opportunity for some strands to always get tucked underneath. The other thing with the technique that we're doing today is that the yarn at the sides, they're more likely to get yarn down sort of like on the edge and go a little bit underneath than the skein that's in the middle. And so there could be differences between these skeins and the dye lots that we have in there. But all of this will come into play once we see the flip. And hopefully, depending on how this comes out, maybe we'll play around with sometime doing a technique where we do a different color with each flip. So then if I flip a third time to like expose some of that center of the skein, then maybe we would use a third color and flip again, use a fourth. If that is something that you would like to see me try, please leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. I am resisting hard the urge to move the yarn and see what's going on down below. I don't think that in these 5 minutes the color spread a ton, but one thing I do want to do is take some water and rinse out this jar and pour that on. Now this color is going to be a lot paler than what we've already put in. And it's just going to be a little bit more of that pastel kind of spread that we had. And I'm debating on this, but I think I am going to go ahead and layer on the rest of this dye. I'm hoping that I'll be a little more conservative with some of that blue. I'll want to be a little more conservative because I know that color will spread farther. And I'm also going to go ahead and fill this bottle up to rinse it out. Now the scribble technique that I'm using today is very random. And what I'm doing with this rinsed out color that again is very pastel is, well, cleaning down the sides a little bit, but also going for areas where I see more white. There is very, very likely going to be white left behind with these techniques we're using today. And again, we're going to see what's happened here. When we flip, we'll see what kind of coverage, how much coverage we have, how much white is left behind, and then we'll make more decisions about if we want to dye the whole thing over again or what. But I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit, I think, for about 10 minutes. I was sitting here watching and waiting, and I couldn't resist coming to take a peek. There's only a hint of color left in the water, which means that most of the color has struck already. Since I'm using a squeeze bottle and you can see some of the areas where I have applied the dye, that might mean that the color might not sink through very much, because as I pour it in, since I'm not adding a lot of volume to the pan, there might not be like force to push the color down very far. It might strike closer to where it hits originally. So we'll have to see. I'm very curious. I mean, maybe this would have been better if I put it in a lot of water and I poured on the side, then flipped and poured versus doing scribbles. So there's a lot of options that future Rebecca can make note of and try in other videos. But I'm going to breathe and wait for the timer to run out before we flip, because it's only been about 2.5 minutes since I set that timer. And really, we probably could flip now, but I said I was gonna wait 10 minutes. We're gonna wait 10 minutes. Okay, I'm just gonna check. I'm not seeing any color left. Now we do see spread, and not just because I added in some of that diluted dye, but there was spread that we had here, which means that there's a chance we have some color that has gone through a fair amount. But now is the moment of truth as I pick the yarn up and flip it over. Yes! It did what I wanted it to. Yes! We've got color going all the way down. Now granted, the purple is mostly going to be on the one side, but this means if the other side looks like this, then this means that whatever is in the middle is going to have some pigment, and we're not going to have something, it still may be unbalanced, but it's not going to be completely and awfully unbalanced. So, phew! I am relieved. But all right, let's carry on. And I think I'm going to start with this blue that, no, I'll bring it in at the end. You guys like watching me second guess myself, right? All right, now we're going to come in with our Caribbean blue. And again, we're going to draw some circles of dye. I like scribbling, whether it's hearts or something else. I'm going to add a little bit to the end. I like doing a scribble because it means that, I don't know, it removes like a harshness, and it means that not always the edge doesn't always get the biggest push of the dye. If I'm going back and forth, the edge always gets the biggest squeeze. And so, I don't know, I like mixing it up like that a little bit. I think we're still gonna want to add more blue, but I also think that we should wait a little bit, probably about 5 minutes, but now I'll come in with this lighter color and add it mostly near the ends, just to leave no dye behind. And I'm gonna come over with a turkey baster of some water and just kind of rinse off some of these edges where I could visibly see some of the dye hanging out, just because why not? There, you can kind of see me rinse it down over there. But okay, let's give this 5 minutes and then we'll decide how much more of the blue to add. I've again added over half of what I partitioned for this project. And part of it is the light that I have over the stove. But it does feel like things are way more blue down there than over here for whatever reason. So I don't think it's just the light. I do feel like that's what the colors are doing. Let's check in and see how we're doing. Okay, I see light blue in here with Caribbean blue and the amount of acid we have in here so far. Not surprised, but we're gonna go in for a little bit more. I want some more color. I'm going in a little, oh gosh, I went in heavy over there. I guess I felt like this other side had a lot more coverage. I guess we've almost added it all, may as well. I'm gonna go rinse this out and I'll be right back. I hope I don't regret using this much of the color, but I'm now looking for some of the areas that are a little bit more white, and that is where I poured that on. And okay, yes, I am cheating. I touched it. I touched the yarn. All right, but I think, goodness, what I'm debating is if I want to add more acid now or if I want to wait a little bit. And I think I'm going to wait a little bit. This blue is probably spread all over everything. It's probably consumed the entire skein. Although I don't know that that's true, and I don't know that that's the case. All right, we're going to wait 5 minutes and then we'll add more acid. And while we wait, we can chat because I have some thoughts here. I decided to go with 2 colors that I know blend really beautifully together for today's project. I didn't go with things that I knew would blend and become more muddy, but I also didn't pick 2 primary colors which would blend and give us secondary type colors when they overlap. And that is something that I think I would definitely do again, maybe do blue and yellow or blue and pink. See, the hard thing is that when you're dealing with primary colors, they don't all mix at a 1-to-1 ratio to get that perfect secondary. So I'd have to go back and look at some of my triad color mixing to try to pick one that I felt would feel relatively balanced. So that way, or I guess I can adjust my recipe so that way if we were to combine everything all at once, we'd get a beautiful green, but if we combine them this way, we'll get a bunch of greens, blues, and yellows. That could be fun. I'm coming up with lots of video ideas right now. But yeah, part of my decision was because, well, I had these stock solutions made up. And so that honestly is a big reason why I went with these colors. But also I thought that it would be really pretty. And given that there might be some asymmetrical balance within the skein, maybe not, but there might be some. Given that potential, I thought that having colors that start off are a little closer together, it would be maybe a little less dramatic. Maybe I should have gone for the drama and I missed an opportunity, but we can always film more videos. And so there will be other opportunities to play around with this in the future. But anyway, Sarah, I really hope you like the colors I'm playing with. I know things are a bit steamy, but we're looking very blue. Very, very blue. And there is a lot of blue in the water, which means that a lot of blue has probably gone all the way through. I'm debating moving the yarn, but let's go ahead and add 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll do one more, 6 tablespoons of white vinegar. And I am going to move the yarn, I think. This will give us a little bit of a reveal at this point, but I don't know, I guess I want to know what we're dealing with, and I want to look and see and check the skeins. So I'm going to pick one. Ooh. Okay, so we've got like mostly blue on one side, purple with a lot of blue on the other. That's cool. I know you're nice and steamy. And I see both purple and blue in the interior. So I think we're going to leave this. There is some white that I'm seeing, but it didn't bother me. I think that this is really, really pretty and fairly unique because of the way the colors spread through or didn't. All right, I'm going to let this heat for 30 minutes. I guess it's already had 5, but I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes, heat this for 30 minutes, and then we'll check back in. But man, you're really getting to listen to me second guess myself. Like I say I'm going to do something, then I pause and think, oh, okay, yes, that's exactly that's the way I'm going to do it today. Oh my goodness. It's been 30 minutes and there's a hint of some blue in the pan, but most of the color is in the yarn. So I'm gonna try to be optimistic and that we won't have a bleeder on our hands, but I'm gonna turn off the heat and let the yarn cool off here in the pan. And once everything is cool, then we can wash it. Let's wash this yarn. I'm not gonna squeeze it very much as I put it into the pan. I see maybe the tiniest hint of blue left in there. But ultimately, almost all the color is in the yarn. And so if we see something super slight, I'm not gonna worry. If we see something heavier, then I might. So for the first rinse, having a little bit in there is a little expected. If the water left has a little bit of color, you expect to see some. Let's cross our fingers, add some soap. I love the modeling we have here. So when you add a little bit of pink to a turquoise, you go from that like bright turquoise blue to a more true classic primary blue. And so combining the purple and turquoise is gonna bring in some of those other blue elements that we just didn't have present. And I'm very excited about that. And so the good news is that the soap didn't make anything worse. But I am going to probably need to give this a good handful of rinses. So what I'm going to do now, we still have a little bit of soap in there. I'm going to fill up the basin and then just let the yarn sort of sit and soak in there for a couple of minutes. Can we just take a moment and look at how beautiful this yarn is? Please not have more color. Oh, we're looking fine. There's just a hint. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse this a few more times off camera. Then I'm going to put it through my spin dryer and hang it up to dry. So then we can come back and see what our finished yarn looks like. I have not fluffed the yarn up at all. This is as it dried off of the drying rack. And we've got our side with more purple here. We've got less purple. Okay, there's our side with more purple. And here is our side with more purple. Now the blue spread all the way through. So when we flip this to see at the side that was more blue, we see a little bit of purple in there, but I mean there's a lot of blue on all the sides. So we're gonna need to do this again to try something that spreads a little bit less to look at what we get from dyeing mostly one side one color and one side another color. But the purple went through enough layers that I'm not mad at this at all. Now to fluff it up, what I do after the yarn is dried is I put my hands through both sides of the skein and just snap it. And I rotate and I snap because sometimes the yarn might bunch up in one place. And so that's the treatment that I do to make things lay like nice and flat. And so by fluffing, that's all I'm talking about. Had we used less water in our dye baths, I think the colorways would have felt more unbalanced because the purple wouldn't have gone through as many layers as it did, and it might have just felt like it was only going to be on a small portion of the yarn. So we are going to push this idea further using a blue that isn't going to spread as much. Oh, but this is so pretty. I adore the way that this turned out. I think that it is a lot of fun. It just, you know, sometimes things don't work to demonstrate an experiment that I'm trying to do. Sometimes things I need to do a little bit differently, and that's okay. And I mean, I love where we ended up, so it's not a fail. It's just, we dyed one side with one color and then the rest of the yarn, all the yarn with another color. That's probably a more accurate title for this video. Sarah Brenneman, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope that you are going to love your yarn. And if you at home would like to learn more about how you can become a lab partner like Sarah, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. Lab partners get shout outs in the videos, plus they tell me colors to avoid, pick a yarn base, and then I create an episode of Dyepot Weekly for everyone to enjoy. You can find more details in the listing in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. This is so pretty. I am so happy with how this turned out. And Caribbean blue is a color that sometimes is a little bit scary, but I think it did so well, and I think that this turned out so much fun. And I'm feeling real inspired. And so I cannot wait to go and play with my dyes some more to create more videos. So please subscribe, turn on notifications, you know the drill. And thank you so much for watching. I just finished shipping out the pre-orders for the 2022 ChemKnits Hanukkah yarn samplers. And I'm still showing no spoilers on my page or YouTube channel or anything. This year's samplers have 9 wrapped packages of mini skeins in either fingering or DK weights with a lot of fun extras for you to treat yourself. And what makes this whole series, this whole sampler extra special is that every night of Hanukkah there will be a yarn dyeing video on YouTube that corresponds to the colorway in the package that you unwrap. So not only can you enjoy fun yarn dyed by me, you can go watch exactly how I dyed it. Again, these samplers are ready to ship now, and you can see more details in my Etsy shop, ChemKnits Creations.